I think at our core, we're incredibly powerful women. Like women are way more powerful than men. Sorry, I'm just going to say it. And, at our core, authentic power is really our nature. That is when we strip everything else away, we are the woman that says, you know what, I want it, right? The women, when given the environment where they feel and supported, they're like, I want to retire early. I want to live a life where I have lots of money and freedom to be with my kids. I want to be heard. Like, I want my voice. I want my creative ideas. I don't want people to take advantage of me.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
I'm so excited to introduce this next guest. It's Erin here, and I just got done interviewing Stacy Mayer. And I got to be honest, it was one of those interviews that I didn't know I was going to go. Stacy and I had just barely met. We met on LinkedIn. We didn't even talk for a hot second beforehand. I tend to like to not do that because I feel like such good stuff comes out in those first authentic conversations that I want you to be a part of it completely. And that's what we did today. Stacy is the best-selling author of a book called Promotions Made Easy. Sounds good, huh? It is good. And she is also a certified executive coach and a promotion strategist. She's a mother and a wife. She lives in Silicon Valley, California. And I loved our conversation because you guys know me. Like, I don't like talking about the normal stuff because the normal stuff doesn't work. And she is the same, but I learned so much from her. Like, a lot of times I have guests and I'm sort of like, yeah, I talk about that all the time, or that's not quite how I see it. But she had me nodding my head the entire time and has such a great tangible perspective. She's also just adorable. She's a storyteller. She tells lots of examples of clients she's had and real life people that have had the same challenges you've probably had and overcome them with just a few small changes that she's coached them on. She's also the creator of Executive Ahead of Time, which she calls a lifetime access group coaching program that really helps you step through how to do some specific things to get yourself promoted. She also has a podcast. We talk about that. But most importantly, what you need to know is she is our kind of people. And she's going to give you some really, really tangible aha advice on how you can get yourself into that promotion that you deserve. So, all right, enough of me. Let's go on to my talk with Stacy Mayer. I was really drawn to you on LinkedIn, where I call my favorite dating app, because you stir the pot, right? And you tell it like it is. So I'd love to dive into so many things. You really believe, it sounds like it started with you were part of this executive women's program that you were leading.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're giving them all this great advice, blah, 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 but the women weren't getting promoted. Tell us a little bit more about like sort of that, I guess, that epiphany you might have had there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I always assumed that I don't think I assumed this consciously, but I assumed that if I was meeting women in a women's program, that there was something wrong with them. And I think that feels so silly to say out loud, but I was actually really surprised that they had been leaning in, that they had been asking for promotions, that there was like literally nothing wrong with them. Their performance reviews were exceeds expectations and all of the things, right? And so I was like, there's something else off here. And, we can keep talking to them about taking bigger risks. We can talk to them about, showing up more, speaking up, how do you get your voice heard in a room full of men, like all that stuff. But I was like, they're kind of already doing it. And so there's still something off in their, just really at that point, it was just a something. So like, I was like, I don't even know what it is. And to be completely transparent, Erin, as a business owner, I was new to running my own business and my own coaching practice. And I have this desire to be different and to differentiate myself. And in the beginning, I was also, how can I separate, distance, not get confused about everything I learned coaching in this program, right? So if I'm going to start my own business, it has to be my own intellectual property. It has to be my own ideas. And so I was like, well, we didn't really talk about promotions, right? We talked about female empowerment. And so I was like, I'm just going to double down on this. I'm just going to think about promotions and figure out if we can really get these women who are not broken, who are total corporate badasses right out of the gate, promoted into higher positions. And it worked. In 6 months, I got 3 women in the C-suite. And they weren't even VPs. Like they were VPs. They weren't SVPs. It wasn't like their next.
It was like a
step.
double. It was like a double jump. So if you don't mind, I'd love to like go into some of the things that you talk about. And the first thing, and probably why I attracted me to you the most, is this sort of poo-pooing of executive presence. So talk to us a little bit about, how you feel about it and what maybe sort of the misperceptions you think are out there about this concept.
Well, the most interesting thing is that when I started to ask men if they needed to work on their executive presence or this idea of executive presence, and how I was like, I don't really I think it's a little bit overused and I don't know if I want to talk about it too much, like just as a term. And all the men were like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I've never been told that. I don't understand that. And then the women that I would talk to, oh yes, I totally need to work on my executive presence. It's like their whole identity was built around this concept that they had to work on their executive presence. If they could figure out their executive presence. And why is that? It's because they've been told it a bunch of times. And then also they tell themselves that repeated story. And so in some ways it's useful because it makes it not about them, right? So we don't want it to be like the problem of, the woman and imposter syndrome, and right, it's not my fault, right? It's just my executive presence.
Right. It's like I think of the Holy Grail, like they just got to click their coconuts until they find the Holy Grail, this tangible thing. Yeah.
Right. And so when we go back to the conversations with the first women that I started coaching, I was like, you know what? You don't need to work on anything. You just need to negotiate better. And I was like, we're just not showing up to these conversations as the badass that you are. And how can you both understand what's in it for them, right? Just typical negotiation skills to get yourself into those higher level positions. And then the other thing that I work on with women right now, more long-term, is advocating year round. Like we can't expect to just show up at our performance review and be like, hey, why didn't I get a promotion? Right. So that's sort of the back end about the promotion specifically, but executive presence. I recently did this webinar training. It was called Executive Presence Exposed. And I loved the word exposed because I was like, imagine if all the women in the world actually knew what executive presence meant. Imagine what the leadership table would look like, right? Like, let's expose it. Let's tell you what it actually means so that we can get past the BS of just like, you know what? You just need to work on yourself. Like, it's just like, it feels like charisma in a way. Like you just need more charisma. You just need that pizzazz, right? You just need that thing. You just need to click the 2 coconuts together. I love that. In some ways, that term really bothers me. And in some ways, I just want to get past it, right? I want to use that term so that we can understand what it's really going to take to be successful in whatever capacity, right? If we want to be included in the conversation, or we want the actual title, we want more money, we want to work at a company that has values that are aligned with us, right? Whatever that success means for us. And then the other thing that was really interesting to me about this executive presence exposed is my book is called Promotions Made Easy. And I was really like, when it first came out, I was just like, I want you all to know how easy this is. Like, something like executive presence feels like a lifelong endeavor. It's like money issues, right? We have these things, imposter syndrome, right? They're like, it's a flaw in our system, right? We have to work on it forever. And I was like, no, you could just, have a conversation using these words with your boss and something might change. And so that's what my book was about. And a woman who is a mother at my kid's school is a COO. And she's like, oh my God, Stacy, I read your book. And I was like, oh, thanks, whatever. And then she's like, no, Stacy, I gave it to my direct report. She's been asking for a promotion for a long time and she's not ready. And she found, my friend found that she was kind of telling her the same stuff. Like, you need to work on your executive presence. Like, you're just not ready. Like, you can't, if I give you a promotion today, you would get eaten alive in this boardroom, right? And she's like, I can't promote you. You're not ready. But she couldn't figure out what to tell her to do to get ready. She was like, that's your book. And so that's how I see executive presence is more as like, it really is a step-by-step process to being seen as an executive leader, to acting, to thinking, to making decisions as an executive leader, which is actually a very tangible step-by-step process.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It's not some elusive, sort of aura that you bring. You brought it up and it was something I wanted to ask about. I'm really curious. You mentioned you could just say this, this to your boss in your one-on-one. And I know one of the things you talk about is like how to create sort of the best one-on-one. Can you tell us more about some of these golden nuggets?
I'll give you a story from yesterday. So this woman had a really wonderful conversation with her mentor. And so her mentor is a woman and she was talking to her about a job that she wanted to apply for. And she goes into the conversation being like, I've been told by HR that I need to be in my current position for longer. I've been told this. I'm not sure if it's going to work out. And so she enters in the conversation like that with that attitude. And we could call it, some people would call it humility or whatever, but it's, in a lot of ways, it's not useful. In this particular case, the woman on the other side, kind of was like, no, you are totally ready. Like, she did that beautiful thing that so many other women did is she saw her light, she saw her abilities, she saw what she was ready and capable. She was like, no, you do not need to be in this role longer. And she just stepped in and she was like, I'm going to be your advocate. I'm going to go out for you. I'm going to, do all the things. Right. And so if we kind of look at that one-on-one, we'd say, well, the outcome was really great, but it wasn't because of my client that the outcome was great. We got lucky that this mentor took her on. So then she calls me yesterday and she says, Stacy, I'm having a meeting with her colleague, a man who I don't have as strong of a relationship with. I wanted to have the same outcome. So the first thing that I pointed out to her was what happened in the first conversation. I said, you got a really great female mentor and she's awesome and keep her around. And I said, but he is not going to act that way at all. And if you come in there playing small and being like, I don't know, I'm not quite sure, this and that. And so there were, so this is a very specific, and I know you love really specific stories. So I'm going to give you
our
the
listeners
specific.
Love the stories. Absolutely.
And then we can sort of look at how can we apply it to all of our one-on-one conversations. But there were a couple of things. I looked at what it was that she wanted to get across. And one of the things that her mentor had told her, the female mentor had said that, diversity is only going to happen if we actually promote women. Right. And so my client, I was like, oh, okay. So what we're going to do is in this conversation, you're going to say, I love how much this company values diversity. Just make that like a statement because it's actually true. And they're saying it at the top. But instead of saying promote me to get to be your diversity count, just say that's why I'm here. And it's really true. She is there because they value diversity. And so some of what I'm doing is having them show up as this peer. So she's not putting on air. She's not saying, but she's saying look, this is a company that values diversity. I want to be a part of this company for the long term, all of which are true. But it's also what matters to him, right? So if she comes in, I want to be promoted, right? It's what matters to him. He knows that the organization cares about diversity. He's looking at a prime candidate right there. And then I also coached her to deliver even more honesty, to tell what her mentor had told her, which was she's ready, right? She's brought her into the conversation. Her mentor is perfectly on board with that, right? And so you're having these very upfront, truthful conversations. You're not skirting around the issues. She's actually saying, I would love, and she even said, I'd love for you to sponsor me. I'd love for you to advocate on my behalf. The great news is I got the email this morning that said, oh my God, Stacy. And it was boom, 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 boom. Everything you said would be true. Sometimes I call myself a magical witch that just sort of like tells you exactly what's going to happen. And it really does. And she's like, everything you said was going to happen. And not only that, but he was very honest with her back. And he said, I'm going to advocate for you. And this needs to happen. And this needs to happen. Right. And now she has the facts, right? There's no wishy-washiness. There's nothing like there's no confusion. She can follow up with him. She can hold him accountable for advocating for her because she was so upfront. She treated him like a peer. She didn't skirt around the issues. And in general, this is what I'm recommending for everybody in all of their one-on-ones. We don't have to be so like conniving in a way, like being like, oh, and some of that for a lot of women looks like playing small, like not saying the thing, or I don't want to be this, or I don't want to be that. But the truth is that we're not being pushy. We're being direct. We're showing them that we can act like an executive leader, that we can insert ourselves into conversation.
I love that. I definitely agree. A lot of times when I've, coached people to, sort of push for something, whether it's the promotion or the pay increase, or it's the demonstration also that you have the cojones to do the job. That's the underlying thing that the other person probably doesn't even know that they're measuring, analyzing. And it reminds me of the time when I was interim CEO for the company. And I ended up becoming CEO and it was part of a larger enterprise. And I remember when I had it, I was like, I'm just going to go balls to the wall and prove, how great I am. And I ran into a colleague. I was coming out of the lunch area and she said, oh, congratulations. And then she said, do you want the job? And I was like, yeah, Chowie, I want the job. And she just looked at me and she said, tell Cheryl you want the job. And just that little thing I would have never done. To your point about being open and honest, my next one-on-one, instead of like pretending like she knew I wanted it because how hard I was working and the results I was getting, literally just saying, and by the way, I want this job, created that clarity, but also like, oh, she has the cojones to have, maybe a little bit tougher conversations that I need in a leader like this.
Right. And then, we marry those tougher conversations with our real personality. And I call our real, and, you're very into authenticity. And I think at our core, we're incredibly powerful women. Like women are way more powerful than men. Sorry, I'm just going to say it. And, at our core, authentic power is really our nature. That is when we strip everything else away. We are the woman that says, you know what, I want it, right? The women, when given the environment where they feel supported, they're like, I want to retire early. I want to live a life where I have lots of money and freedom to be with my kids. I want to be heard. Like I want my voice. I want my creative ideas. I don't want people to take advantage of me, right? I don't want to feel like I have to always be looking up to a man to save me. I mean, actually, I never even thought of this, but we were watching the princess, like the story on Ralph Breaks the Internet, where they were talking about the princess and the man always saves you. There's like this great scene where they're like, are you a princess? And then she's like, says all these reasons. It's like, do you believe that a man has to come and save you? And she's like, yes. And then they're like, you're a princess. Great. And, but I was just thinking that the way that the corporate structure is set up is that we have this person, right? And sometimes it can be a woman, but it's this person above us who saves us, right? And so when we are in our authentic power, authenticity isn't like diminishing what we care about, our values. It's authentic power and really being able to just kind of say, you know what? I want this job. I told one of my bosses one time I wanted her job someday. And I used the word someday. I was like, I'm not going to take your job right now, but mentor me, guide me, teach me, tell me what I need to do, and that really empowers the other person too, to be like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really intrigued. You also talk about how you need to talk about more than just the what you do, but how you do it. Tell us more about that.
I call it showing your work. And basically what the idea is that we need to actually have more conversations about what we're working on. A great example in terms of executive presence, and we're talking about that, is we can think of executive presence like this idea of showing you have cojones, right? Like speaking up, saying the thing, right? And a lot of times when people don't have executive presence, something that they'll be told is that they're too nice. And so, when you're told you're too nice, you're like, well, I want to be nice, right? And quite frankly, I don't want more mean people at the leadership table, right? I want and so by being told that you're too nice, but then our only option is just to speak up, to speak louder, to say the thing, to be what we fear would be too aggressive. And a lot of times it comes off as too aggressive, right? And we've been told that. And so we kind of go on this like hamster wheel of going back and forth. Well, to me, that's telling, not showing, right? So we're telling them that we're not nice. We're telling them that we're mean. And that's why it comes off as aggressive. Like we're actually like being louder or like inserting ourselves. Sometimes the women that I work with, they have all these men and the voices are so loud in the conference room. And they're like, I really feel like the only way I can get heard is to be like, shut up. And sometimes they'll kind of do that without those words. They'll be like, hey, and then everybody's like, what is going on? Like, what's wrong with her? Right. And that's like crossing over. So the showing your work is the place in the middle. So when they're telling you that you're too nice, what they're really telling you is that I don't think you can cut it in the boardroom. I think this job is a little too aggressive for you and you're going to like get eaten alive, right? I had another woman that I interviewed for my podcast who was like, the best advice that she ever was given was from a man who said, there's all men at the next level, like, right? It's all men. And because he said that she was able to say, I know, and I'm ready. Right. So, that actually was very good advice because she could then say, I understand what that means. I understand who I need to be. So from a showing your work perspective, really all I think too nice means is I can do hard things. That's all it means. So you don't have to be too aggressive. We don't need to yell in the boardroom. And then we also don't have to be the side, which is just like, well, I want to be nice and I like being nice and I like bringing the cupcakes and I like knowing everybody's birthdays and I like all those things. But we can kind of see that neither one really works for us at that executive level. And so when we can show our work and show that we can do hard things, what that means is having conversations with your boss about all the awesome stuff that you're actually doing. So for instance, if you are working with a very difficult employee on your team who is not delivering, who is, instead of going to your boss and consistently complaining about that employee and being like, you know what, he failed again and this thing happened and it's just so frustrating.
Like status, right? Yeah, let's kind of get
like
into
a status update. Totally. You are dealing with the conversation in some way. You're dealing with this employee in some way. So have that conversation with your boss, which is I took him aside. I said this to him. I have now put a deadline on him. What I'm going to do is that then 3 weeks from then, I'm going to, circle back, like whatever that might be. So that's showing your work. That's actually engaging with them and showing them that, hey, I can do hard things. I'm willing to have those tough conversations. I'm willing to hold this other person accountable. You do that a number of times, they're going to stop calling you too nice. Now, what didn't change? Her personality. Like she still smiles all the time. She, all the things. Yeah. So that's the difference.
I love that. To show them that you can do hard things. And I agree with you. It doesn't mean go into your one-on-one and puke up every detail, because that's also actually, probably a little bit of an antichrist that you're ready for the executive, but show the how, show evidence. The hard conversation. Don't just be like, we implemented the new thing. Like, tell them about the really hard call you had with 17 stakeholders where you were the one that corralled everybody to get back on track. Or
exactly.
Sprinkle in strategically those I'm doing hard things.
Yeah.
Evidence.
Yeah, exactly. And
that.
if you think about advocating for your promotion year round, that's what it is. It's sprinkling that in all year long, so that we're not all of a sudden at performance review time trying to give all of this information. So then it's just a status, like vomiting, right? I did all these great things, right? You're doing those checkpoints all throughout the year.
But you brought it up, the annual. We have to go there. You wrote a book on promotion made easy, and I agree with you. It is, should be something you're doing kind of quote unquote off cycle. But what are the top 1 or 2 tips that you have for people going into those god awful year-end review conversations?
What I enjoyed the most is pointing out for people what's actually happening, right? So when I was talking about the woman who had this great conversation with her mentor, and then she wants to recreate that with this other person at work, I'm like pointing out to her why it went so well, why this woman supported her, how it works when you have a relationship like this versus a relationship like that, right? Like really just pointing out the obvious is so helpful for people. And we take that for granted. So what's the obvious? The obvious at performance review time is that all decisions have already been made. If we know that all decisions have already been made before we walk into the room, we walk into and we enter it very differently. One is we may have advocated much earlier on, right? Like not wait for that performance review. And then the other thing is that we're not going to argue in the performance review to try and still get the raise, to try and still get the promotion, right? Because now we're already put into the next cycle. And in general, the best that we can hope to do is understand what we can do better and understand what we can improve for the next time. And in that conversation, and also all that being said, a much better question is there still a chance, right? Is there still time? So if we know that all decisions have already been made, and then we have this inkling that maybe that's not true, because maybe this is a preliminary performance review before the promotions and the raises happen, we just literally ask, is there anything I can do to still get my full bonus? Is there anything I can do to still get that title or whatever? And then they'll actually tell us versus arguing about the problems at hand. Like, right. So they tell you these list of things that you did or could have done better. Right. And so you're going to sort of like fight that. Instead, it's like, okay, I hear everything that you're saying and I definitely want to improve. First thing I need to understand, is this changeable? Okay, no, it's already set. All right, now let's have a conversation about how to move forward for next year or next 6 months or whatever that might be, right? Is there a chance that I could get promoted in 3 months, from now? What would I need to do? Can we have regular conversations from here on out, right? So that I can make sure that that can happen, right? And again, it goes back to what you said, Erin, about the idea that we say the thing that we want, which is that we actually want to be promoted, and we say it out loud. So we say, one woman got hired and within 2 months, she was like, I would like my bonus at the end of the year to be above the actual bonus. And she said it right when she got hired. And it was not a threatening conversation. It wasn't an ultimatum. She just said, I would like to see that happen. And her boss was like, well, kind of laughed. And she was like, well, if you want that to happen, you need to do this. And she's like, I'm up for it.
Love it.
And, and then she kept checking in and then she kept feeding back and everything. And I think she ended up getting 1% over the actual bonus. I think her goal was probably 5%. She got the 1%, but she was still very happy because that would not have happened without that conversation at the beginning of the year.
I love that. So many times people probably listening can also, think about the times when they get promoted without the pay.
Oh, yes.
How do you navigate those conversations?
So it's really interesting because executive ahead of time as a principal, which is the name of my flagship program, it's like, well, okay, women are already getting promoted without the pay. Like, why would we want to do the job of an executive before being an executive, right? So it's like, oh, I don't understand, right? What is this? So really just kind of acknowledging that that's what's happening again. Like, we get promoted without the pay. The other thing is really understanding what it is that you're doing that is outside of your pay cycle. So a lot of times people focus on the title itself, like, well, I should have gotten paid. They also focus on kind of other circumstances, which is they told me that it was because we just laid off half our team and everything. And so that's just the way it is, right? They focus on, something like, well, my job didn't actually change. Right. So I don't really need, even though I got the promotion, they were just catching up with the job that I was already doing, which really, let's get real. That means you should have been paid more a long time ago. right? So we're kind of really looking at what the actual circumstances are. So that is not a negotiation tactic that my title changed. It really isn't, honestly. What did change? So I'll give you another specific example. So a woman who I had been working with for almost 4 years was promoted to chief sales officer from senior vice president. At the point where she got promoted, it was so of course, and it was so obvious, and it was so like, yeah, of course. Like, I mean, everybody involved, it was just a title change. Like, it was just so obvious. And in some ways that is so wonderful. Like, that just feels so good, right? You're like, well, that was easy. In some ways, right? It's just like everything clicked. It was beautiful. And she had this conversation. She's like, I'm not really expecting a pay raise, and I don't really know what is going to change. And, and I was like, she's like, my job hasn't changed. And I was like, what? And she's like, well, nothing is really different. I'm still reporting to the CEO. I was reporting to the CEO before, and it's kind of the same. And I was like, No. I was like, when you're in the C-suite, you're the top decision maker. I said, do you feel like you can go to your CEO now and ask him for advice? Do you feel like you have to, like, before, even when she was senior vice president, she could divert attention to other people. She could avoid making these decisions, these really big decisions. I was like, your entire role just changed, right? And she's like, really? Oh my gosh, you're right. And I was like, you're going to be making some of the most powerful decisions that you've ever made completely on your own. That is worth at least, but whatever price, $30K, $50K, $100K, I don't know. It's worth at least that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so back to the conversation itself, you just ask, right? Okay, so now that I'm the main decision maker, can we level set my salary? Right? As opposed to now that my title changed.
Right. What is the delta really in the gravity of the role? Even if it's not the job responsibilities on the HR, bulleted checklist of what you're doing. I mean,
you can go back in time. You can say, I've been doing this job for 6 months. I didn't receive a raise, and then this, and but it's like, we're looking at the role itself and the responsibilities. And when we sort of understand what the different hierarchies are and what happens at these different levels. There was an example where a woman just put a random comment in our Facebook group about something that she had to negotiate with a client about their contract. And I sort of said, I was like, why are you doing this at your title? Like, I was like, this is not your job. And then it was really great because about 5 other women pointed in. They're like, we have a whole department that does that. We have right. And so instantly she just realized that she was working above her title, and that empowered her to actually negotiate. So when you're in these groups, like you have as well, where you're surrounded by other women who are sort of like, what, at our company, it actually doesn't work that way. Then it gives you at least the knowledge and the understanding of what it is that you're really negotiating versus the title itself, right? So you're saying, oh, I am now the main decision maker. I'm negotiating client contracts that's worth something.
Yeah. Well, I love that because so many times, especially women think it's about how much work you're doing, and it isn't. It's really the gravity of the decisions, the stress. I remember when I became COO, maybe this is just a public company thing, but when I became COO of, like, I had to get fingerprinted. I'm like, that's definitely worth
that's
something,
worth
right?
Some money right there.
That risk. I mean, it's not the day I got fingerprinted that was worth the money. It's the knowing, like, whoa, what do they need those fingerprints for, right? And you're sort of now at risk of things that you weren't before.
Nicole, what are you doing over there? I'm finally getting up off the virtual couch and making some career moves, just like you told me. And I came across your authenticity playbook.
Yeah, I forgot to tell you about it. This authenticity playbook I've had for a long time, and it's actually the most downloaded resource I have. It's basically 10 quote unquote plays, authenticity plays that you can make at work to stand out and get promoted and use authenticity as your strategy, your secret weapon.
I'm really going to take this to heart because despite all the sports references, I know that it's full of your awesome and your authenticity. And it probably is going to help me go far or go home or go big or whatever the sports reference is.
all the things. So listeners, if you also want the authenticity playbook, you can go to beauthenticinc.com/playbook and you can make career moves like Nicole. Whoop, whoop, Heisman!
Okay, curiosity question, because you put it out there. I know nothing about this. You were an actor or are an actor. Is this a quote unquote actor or a real actor? And what it taught you about, building real executive presence? Tell us more.
Oh my God, so many things. So I was actually, I went to performing arts high school high school. I lived in New York. I started my own theater company. I moved out to Palo Alto. I worked at a hedge fund. So that was my corporate gig because I decided I wasn't going to wait tables and sort of piece together money. So my day job was a hedge fund, and then they transferred me out to Palo Alto. I thought that Palo Alto was the same as LA for some reason. Like I was like, it's so close. I'll be like, this is just all makes so much sense. And it wasn't at all. And so at the point where I came out to California was sort of when I shifted unbeknownst to me, kind of away from traditional acting and auditioning and doing all the things, into sort of what does life mean? I call it my spiritual awakening. I took I got a one-way ticket to India, did a spiritual pilgrimage, and sort of found myself in all of those amazing things. But from the acting standpoint, the biggest things that I rely on are my ability to fail and the agency that I created in my career. And I think that is consistently what I'm coaching women to do, is both of those things. So when you're having I have a process called 15-minute ally meetings, which is really negotiating those one-on-one conversations on a regular basis. When we're doing that, we're actually setting ourselves up for failure, right? When we ask the question, which is like, I'd like to be promoted, it can seem easier to just not ask. And so really, you're setting yourself up for the no. You're setting yourself up when you ask. But in my opinion, that is everything. Like, it's like, I have to realize that is completely my worldview. That is my point of view on how we negotiate the world. And if we don't ask, we're never going to receive. And I just totally get it. So when I first moved to Chicago as an actress and I was an improviser, I was having trouble auditioning. I hated it. So you guys can equate this to interviewing. I mean, everybody hates it. It's so hard. And I was talking to my mom, 22 years old, and I was like, oh, this is just miserable. I just hate everything. And she was like, well, I think you need to audition more. And I was like, what? That doesn't even make sense. And she's like, you need to get used to failing. And so I decided to go on 2 auditions a week without even really looking at the character description. So that over-analysis, is this right for me? Will I get that role? And so I just gave myself that goal, and I got used to failing really, really quick, right? So I was just putting myself out there. And then before I knew it, within 4 or 5 months of this practice, I was getting offered roles without auditioning. I didn't have to audition anymore. I was just getting sort of put into roles. And that's what happens for my clients when I tell them, always be interviewing, always be interviewing, always be interviewing. And they're like, that doesn't make sense. I'm not leaving my job. I'm like, well, what it does is it's having a conversation with somebody at a different organization, getting to know them, right? It could be actually saying yes versus overanalyzing when somebody gives you that job description on LinkedIn and you're like, well, I don't know if I would get it, right? Like, don't not interview just because you don't know if you would get it, right? And so just use that as practice and staying curious. And then the second place is the agency, is that I believe that we create everything for ourselves. And in the corporate world, often, like we've already talked about, we can feel like we have zero agency, we have zero control. And when I was in New York City and I was standing in a cattle call line, and a cattle call is like, you are auditioning and they say you can be here from 9 to 5 and you might get seen by the casting director. And it's literally like so horrible. It's physically
painful. It's just stand around.
Yes. Yeah. And then you get 1 minute and then you're like, oh, next. It's just really gut wrenching. And so I decided to start my own theater company instead. So I was standing in this line and said, I'm never going to do this again. I left actually. And then I started my own theater company. And what we did is we had this underground, it was literally like underground in Manhattan. And I would bring in performers and then we would sort of just like have these time slots, but we shared audience as well. And so it kind of became like this variety show, but they were sort of these smaller individual plays or improv comedy and this underground theater. And one of my favorite things is that Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote Hamilton. So his group Freestyle Love Supreme would perform there very often. And
Amazing.
It was that kind of caliber of performance. It really gives you that idea of that early playing around. We all have agency. And then I would invite casting directors to come see the shows and things like that. Like, let's perform and then let them come versus the opposite that so many people will stand in line and hope. And then they're not even performing, but then they're still trying to get the casting director that way. So I always reverse everything. So my confidence, agency, everything that we are in control of our careers, absolutely 150%. I have no doubt. And all the coaching I do is to give women that empowerment. We're not going to fix you. You're not broken. Where you're starting is already excellent. Let's just change the language a little bit and get engaged in the conversation and make things happen for you.
Oh my gosh. I got to tell you, Stacy, you really had me have a very new epiphany, which is that most women in the corporate world, this was me before I went out, right? We have gone down a path of pretty, I don't want to say low resistance because everybody's had their challenges, but we have not failed much, right? We have gotten good grades. We've gotten into mostly the colleges we've wanted. We've probably interviewed, just a little bit to get our first job and haven't had that exposure. And that's why we're probably so worried about going into a room and saying, I want this, because we're protecting ourselves, right, against the no. And you're right. The more you can do things, not just doing the interviewing, but finding a passion project, getting out there, being more entrepreneurial, even if it's not a total quote unquote side gig, to get you exposure. Because now that I'm an entrepreneur like you, right, we face rejection nonstop, whether it's a new client or we're pitching an article to Forbes or, pitching my next book right now. And I didn't have that in the first half of my life. And that experience, it really hardens you. It gives you perspective. And I love what you say about agency and being able to just, change the game. You changed the game with your the model that you created.
I'll give you an example because I think about thought leadership as being really important and sort of understanding your own what matters to you as a leader. And it can be something that can be very independent of your organization. You can feel like, oh, I can speak on panels. I can post on LinkedIn. I can talk about what matters to me, regardless of being a director of communications, right? Like like I can do that on my own. What the interesting thing is I had this client who started posting on LinkedIn, just like kind of random articles, sharing them. And she got called into the HR office. What's going on over there? Right? So, you just rolled your eyes, right?
Yeah.
And we can sort of be pissed about it. And that's why I was like, oh, wow, that's horrible, right? Like they're basically saying one is it wasn't even like a legal issue. She was not representing her company or anything like that. It was really like, I think that you have too much power, basically, and we're not going to support that. And so, maybe tone it down a little bit. And the conversation that we had versus like, let's talk about how unfair that is and how awful. And I said, now you have information.
The exorcism. You had to have the exorcism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, look, now you have information. And I said, because you want to be a thought leader, like that is absolutely your long-term goal. It is what you want to create. And when you feel stifled in your current role and you're like, wow, things just aren't working out. Like maybe I should work harder. Maybe I should get them to accept me. Maybe you're in the wrong company. Maybe this company is not going to support you in this way. And it was just so clear. I was like, you have information. And so part of failing is this ability to create information, that we now can see. We now see what's working or what's not working. And if we don't actually ask for the promotion and then get told no, that you're not going to get it for 3 years, get told no because you'll never get it, right? Like whatever that might be, now you have information versus this sort of nebulous that we live in, which is just if we just work harder, if we just try, if we just meet the right person. No, sometimes we just need the information. We need to be able to see the writing on the wall. And the only way we're going to do that is to try, to say the thing, to put ourselves out there. And then we're like, oh my gosh, that didn't work. So I could continue to conform and work in this job. And if we need the job, like that's what we'll do. And we're like, okay, I get it. And I'm also going to be interviewing and trying to figure out what I can do. And actually, in her case, I taught her to interview for a skip level. So she ended up receiving a VP level role after that, because I was like, if you really want to have agency, let's get you a higher title so that you kind of get out of this middle management trap where, you know, regardless of LinkedIn, that's going to be the constant struggle that you're going to have. And so then she was able to interview and land a VP level role, which did really help her in terms of her responsibility and her agency and feeling like she had that voice.
Oh my goodness. I am so happy you're out there, Stacy, doing this great work. I'm so happy that I was able to meet you and stalk you and bring you on. This, I think, has been so helpful for our listeners. I absolutely adore you.
Thank you.
I love your
Same
authenticity and I love your no bullshit approach, which I think you even say, and it's true, right? Like it's not just words on your website. It is you. I know you have your book, Promotions Made Easy. I'm sure people are running out to grab that for sure. And then you also have a podcast, Women Changing Leadership with Stacy Mayer.
Yes.
Which I've listened to and is great, right? It's really focused on exactly what you're talking about with you and as well as other guests. So where can people, though, interact with you the most and keep following up on all the great stuff you put out there?
Well, like we started this conversation, LinkedIn's a great forum as well. I love connecting with people. I post videos every day. I get to meet amazing people like you too, Erin. So connect with me on LinkedIn, listen to my podcast, share the podcast. We need more women in higher level leadership positions, share the book, all the things. So I really appreciate this forum to be able to do that as well.
Awesome. Thank you again. This is great.
Thank you.
Friends, do you have other friends? Are they adults? Are they out in the world somewhere? Please, please, please invite them to listen to our podcast.
Okay, dude, you sound like a late night, like 2 a.m. infomercial. Basically, what she's saying is our love language is ratings, reviews, and sharing the podcast. We'd love nothing more than if you would do that.